I wasn't supposed to be on that diplomatic crew. Hell, I wasn't even supposed to be out of quarantine after what happened on Velis 9. But orders from above were clear. Escort the team. Stand in the background. Don't speak unless spoken to. I was a soldier, a former battlefield commander who'd seen too many fronts and had too few winds to sleep well at night. Now I was a glorified bodyguard. We were sent to orbit a planet the Empire had only just detected 2 cycles ago. A faint signal, a blip on long-range scans that didn't match any known energy signature. The science team was ecstatic. They believed they'd discovered a dormant civilization, a pre-warp society, perhaps. Something to study, something to file under primitive and irrelevant. They were wrong. I remember how silent the observation deck was when we first saw it. Not the planet, no, the structure around it. A black sphere the size of a moon, orbiting in impossible stillness. No rotation, no energy emissions, just there, staring back. The lead scientist, a nervous bastard who never made eye contact, called it a Dyson fragment. Said it had to be a ruin, maybe a defense system, long shut down. The diplomats called it a cultural artifact. I called it a mistake. You could feel it in your bones. The closer we got, the colder it felt. Not temperature-wise, just wrong. Like something was peeling away your thoughts and peering at them before you even knew what they were. I had nightmares that night. Everyone did. But no one talked about it. On the second day, the black sphere responded. No comms, no visuals, just a signal, not in any language or frequency we knew. A pulse, a pattern. It hit our systems and shut down everything for 13 seconds. Life support, gravity, internal clocks, even our implants. When it came back, the logs were gone, scrambled, rewritten. Still, the scientists insisted on sending a shuttle. I went down with them. Armed, of course. No one ever asked me what I thought, but I carried extra mags that day. I knew something was off. You don't stare into something like that and come out clean. We touched down on a platform that hadn't existed moments before. It had formed from the surface like it had been waiting. Like it knew. One of the researchers puked in his helmet, tried to play it off as vertigo. Liar. It was fear. Raw, choking, man shouldn't be here kind of fear. We walked into a corridor that looked carved from obsidian, but the scans said it wasn't any known element. It had no temperature. It didn't reflect light. It didn't even exist in some parts of the visual spectrum. Then we met them. Not in person. Not at first. The air shimmered, and we were shown images. No sound, just flashes of forms, tall, shifting, alien in every sense, but not just strange. Wrong, as if the universe had turned itself inside out to make them. They didn't walk or fly or move. They appeared, like a thought you hadn't formed yet. One of the crew, an engineer, screamed until his throat tore. His mind couldn't take it. The others stood frozen, locked in that imagery, drool slipping from the corners of their mouths. I alone could move. I didn't understand why. Something touched my mind. Not with words, not with intention, but with presence, a vast, unending intellect, indifferent, observing. Like I was an insect it was trying to classify. It let me go. I dragged what was left of the team back to the shuttle. Only 2 made it. The rest collapsed, bleeding from ears and eyes, bodies intact but minds annihilated. Back aboard the cruiser they isolated me. Ran every test known to the Empire. Called me a freak. Said maybe I had a mutation. Said I was resilient to non-linear neurological input. I didn't care. What mattered was this. They weren't primitive. They weren't even advanced. They were beyond understanding. And they had let me live. Which means they were sending a message. And I don't think the Empire was ready to hear it. They held me in a decontamination chamber for 5 days. I say decontamination, but it felt more like a prison with a lab coat. Every inch of the room was sterilized. White walls, bright lights. No corners, no shadows, no silence. That was the worst part. The never-ending hum of machines monitoring my vitals, my brain waves, my pupil dilation. I told them the others didn't make it because their minds couldn't take what they saw. They didn't believe me. Said trauma was making me misremember. But I remembered everything. Too well. The lead interrogator was a psychologist from the Empire's central sector. Cold hands, fake smile, eyes that didn't blink enough. She asked me if I felt compelled by what I saw, if I'd had visions afterward. I told her no, but that was a lie. I saw them every time I closed my eyes. I didn't know their name. They didn't have one. Not a spoken one, not in a way we'd understand. But they existed, and that alone should have scared every damn system in the Empire. Instead, they kept asking me, "Do you believe it was a weapon?" "No," I said. "It didn't attack us. It just looked." They didn't like that answer. They were hoping for something easier, a threat they could quantify, something to throw ships at. A week later, I was released from quarantine under one condition. Shut up. They ordered me to sign a silence clause, bury the mission report, and pretend it never happened. The surviving researcher had already gone catatonic, and the other one, Raynar, refused to speak anything but gibberish. It sounded almost musical, but not in any known scale or rhythm. He kept repeating a phrase. Not light, not dark, just before. It made the room feel colder when he said it, like truth was leaking into places it didn't belong. When I asked to return to duty, they gave me a desk post. They wanted me out of sight. A month passed. I kept my mouth shut, mostly. The dreams didn't stop. Sometimes I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, seeing those impossible shapes hanging in the ceiling, fading as soon as I blinked. But the real fear didn't come from the dreams. It came from the silence. Because after that encounter, the black sphere stopped transmitting. No more signals, no movement, just that same eerie stillness until it wasn't. 3 Empire vessels vanished over the course of a week. No debris, no emergency beacons, no escape pods, just gone. Each one had flown near a similar anomaly, identical to the one we encountered. Black spheres showing up across fringe sectors, orbiting dead planets. We found 6 more. They weren't ruins, they were listening posts, and they were waking up. The Empire's brass tried to spin it as spatial instability, gravity shears, rogue AI interference. But rumors spread fast in the military. The kind of rumors that make men stare into their drinks too long and double-check their escape pods before boarding. I got a message from a contact deep in military intelligence. Someone I'd served with during the Alrak siege. Trusted him with my life. The message was short. 4 words. They're not ignoring us. The next day, he was dead. Suicide, they claimed. Funny thing was, the gun he supposedly used was registered as lost 2 years ago on a battlefield halfway across the galaxy. I was done being quiet. I pulled everything I could from the internal archives, logs, sensor data, mission recordings. Most of it had been classified or scrubbed. But some files couldn't be erased. Not entirely. I pieced together a pattern. Every black sphere had the same effect when approached. System interference, mental degradation, temporary loss of AI autonomy, and in one case, something worse. A medical ship, Hurrian class, drifted off course near the Minak sector and broadcast one final message before it went dark. 6 words. They are not observing. They're assembling. That was 3 days ago. And now, across every Empire terminal, every screen, every fleet channel, the same image appeared. A symbol. Not human, not alien. Just pure geometry. Shifting, impossible, reshaping itself as if it didn't belong to space or time, and then a voice, not a language, not sound, just understanding. You were noticed. They shut down the network the same night the symbol appeared. Fleet Command tried to pass it off as a cybernetic breach drill. said it was routine, standard procedure. Everyone knew that was a lie. They shut off Galactic comms, rerouted all civilian transmissions, and placed every Outer Rim colony under silent lockdown. No news in, no news out. That's when the panic really started. I was stationed at Norak Station, a deep space listening post orbiting the dust belt in the Varnus region, far from anything important. That's why they put me there. Bury the witness. Forget the story. But when the screens went dark and the command AI stopped responding, I knew we weren't watching anymore. We were being watched. 3 days into the blackout, a fleet destroyer docked at Norak. No communications, no clearance, just brute override. Soldiers flooded in, silent, armed to the teeth, helmets sealed. No insignia, no ranks. I knew the type. Internal security. The Empire's secret cleaners. Their job wasn't to protect. It was to erase. One of them handed me a data slab. Said nothing. Just turned and left. The slab had a single file. Video footage. Not from Norak, not from any known system. No tags, no logs, but I recognized the terrain. It was from a fringe world we'd catalogued years ago, labeled uninhabitable due to radiation pockets. The video was grainy, likely corrupted during transmission, but what it showed chilled me in a way nothing ever had. A group of civilians, Empire researchers, maybe 20 of them, standing still in a wide clearing, staring at the sky, not moving, not talking, just staring. A sound, faint, metallic, rang out, like a chime being bent through time. And then they dropped, not fell, not collapsed, just dropped, like gravity had flicked a switch, straight down, crumpled like paper. But they didn't die. They started twitching, not seizing, learning. Their bodies moving in unnatural patterns, limbs jerking into shapes I didn't recognize, as if they were mimicking something none of us could see. One of them turned to face the camera. His eyes were gone, replaced by a glistening black layer, pulsing like it was alive. And then the screen cut to black. No explanation, no context, just that one file. I watched it 3 times, couldn't stop. Every time I closed my eyes after that, I saw them twitching in my head. Something was being implanted in them, something conceptual maybe, not physical, like they'd been rewritten, repurposed, and the Empire had tried to cover it. I confronted the ranking officer at Norak, demanded to know why I was given the file. He denied everything. Then, hours later, his shuttle exploded during departure. No mechanical failure. Someone made sure he wouldn't talk. 2 more black spheres appeared that week. One near a gas giant colony, the other on the edge of Imperial trade routes. No signals, no attacks, just presence. People started defecting. Pilots, engineers, even some high-ranking officials vanished from their posts. Some said they were going rogue. Others whispered they'd been invited. Not taken, invited. Like the black spheres were offering something better than the Empire ever could. And maybe they were, because for the first time in recorded history, the Empire couldn't explain what was happening. That terrified them. Every Empire needs control, needs certainty. Without that, power unravels. But the more they tried to understand these entities, the more they exposed how little they actually knew about the universe. We'd spent centuries thinking we were the pinnacle, the builders, the conquerors, the enlightened. But we were none of those things. We were children drawing on cave walls, thinking we'd painted the stars. I began receiving strange transmissions, not through official channels, but through dreams. I'd wake up with coordinates, memories that weren't mine, visions of places I'd never been, machines that didn't function by physics we understood. One dream showed me a city suspended in a star, impossible to reach yet alive with movement. I started drawing them, sketching those shapes, the same geometry from the black sphere, lines intersecting in patterns that formed and unformed simultaneously. And then one night, while reviewing the dream coordinates, I saw it. A map. Not of systems, not of stars, of consciousness, not ours. Theirs. I stopped sleeping. Couldn't afford to. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt them closer. Not watching, merging. Dreams weren't dreams anymore. They were blueprints, memories, messages in a language my brain shouldn't understand. But somehow I did. And I wasn't the only one. The few of us left on Norak Station who'd seen the footage, who'd felt that same static itch crawling behind the eyes, we began to change. At first it was subtle. Better reflexes, faster cognition. We could finish each other's thoughts, complete broken code strings without running simulations, predict system failures hours before they happened. It felt like evolution, until it didn't. One of the techs, Ramil, a quiet ex-marine turned engineer, collapsed in the reactor core maintenance bay. When I got to him, he was whispering something over and over. I leaned in close and heard it. "We're waking up where we never slept." He looked at me like I was supposed to understand. Then his eyes rolled back, and blood leaked from his ears like someone had poured boiling ink into his skull. He died before Medbay could stabilize his neural implant. They covered it up, of course. Said he'd suffered a seizure, stress-related, occupational hazard. But when I accessed his personal logs, buried deep behind 3 layers of encryption, I found a message addressed to me. It wasn't written in words. It was math. Equations far beyond anything we were taught in the Empire's naval academies. The kind of math that made computers stutter and AI routines crash. I spent hours decrypting just the first line. Time is recursive. They're not coming. They've always been here. That night, the black sphere moved. It didn't drift or thrust or warp. It just wasn't where it was before. One moment it orbited the dead star outside our sector. The next, it hovered above Norak Station, so close it blacked out our visual feeds. Just there, like a thought made real. We lost all systems within seconds. No power, no communications, no AI, just darkness and silence. And then, across every surface, floors, walls, even our skin, the symbols appeared, glowing softly, shifting in patterns that weren't random, weren't static. It was communication. Not words, recognition. They weren't showing us what they were. They were showing us what we were becoming. The Empire, desperate, tried to force contact. A battle group dropped out of FTL orbiting our sector. 3 cruisers, 2 dreadnoughts, all top class, loaded with experimental weaponry. They hailed the sphere. They warned it. They threatened it. And then they fired. I remember watching from the observation deck. The first salvo lit the sky. Dozens of antimatter torpedoes screaming across the void. They never made contact. They stopped mid-flight, just froze, like time had forgotten to carry them forward. The ships, too, their engines flared, then flickered out. The entire fleet, millions of tons of imperial metal and firepower, hovered in complete paralysis. And then, one by one, they folded inward, like paper crumpling in reverse. No explosion, no sound, just vanishing geometry. What was once ships became shapes, incomprehensible and unreal. Pieces of them reappeared, floating, a bridge window here, a captain's chair there, scattered across space like memories detached from reality. That was the Empire's answer. Their might, their arrogance, and it was erased in less than 60 seconds. Norak Station stood in silence. No attack followed, no demand, no ultimatum, just the sphere, glowing softly, as if to say, "We are not enemies. We are inevitability." I looked around the station and saw it in their eyes, those who'd seen the truth. We weren't afraid anymore, not in the traditional sense. We weren't even loyal to the Empire now. We were something else. Not traitors, not servants, witnesses. We were evacuated 2 days later. Not because of the black sphere, but because Norak Station had started to change. The walls were bending in subtle, impossible ways. Hallways that used to lead to storage bays now circled back into themselves. Gravity reversed in certain rooms without warning. Some doors opened into pitch blackness where sound didn't echo. Others wouldn't open at all, like they were waiting for a permission we hadn't earned. It wasn't malfunction, it was transformation. And deep down, every one of us who'd been touched by the symbols, the geometry, the dreams, we knew it wasn't the station evolving. It was us. By then, the Empire had stopped pretending things were under control. They didn't send transports, they sent caskets with engines, remote-controlled evacuation pods meant for biological contamination zones. We were told not to touch anything from the station, no belongings, no data. We were treated like a plague, and maybe, in their eyes, we were. They didn't want what we'd seen getting out. But they were too late. We were scattered to different sectors, reassigned under fake names, spread across outposts like dust in the wind. I ended up on a supply rig in the Beltway drifts, working under an alias, no rank, no file, a ghost with a mop. But the dreams didn't stop. In fact, they became clearer. I began to remember things I'd never lived, walking through cities that pulsed with light but cast no shadows, watching beings communicate not through language but resonance, emotions turned into energy, exchanged like breath. I understood their purpose now, not invasion, not domination, integration. They weren't gods, they weren't machines, they were the next form of thought, and they'd been waiting for something to reach up instead of just looking out, waiting for a species desperate enough to stare into the void and not flinch. Humanity had always been arrogant, conquering planets, enslaving lesser species, rewriting cultures in the name of order. But that arrogance had finally attracted something ancient, something that didn't care about our weapons, or our empires, or our pride. It only cared about what we could become. One night I woke up on the floor of the cargo bay, drawing the same shape over and over, not with ink, with my own blood. My fingertips were raw, torn open. I didn't feel pain. I just felt guided. I wasn't alone either. Others had started showing the same signs. Across the galaxy, reports came in of humans collapsing mid-shift, waking up with new languages in their heads. Technicians rebuilding machines into impossible forms. Pilots navigating through asteroid fields blindfolded, guided by instinct that no longer belonged to them. The Empire tried to quarantine them. Some were executed, others simply disappeared. But we knew the truth. They weren't being silenced. They were being collected, brought somewhere the Empire didn't know existed. A place outside the map. A place with no name, because names meant definition, and definition meant limitation. And these beings, these architects of thought, didn't recognize limitation. I received another dream message that week. It wasn't coordinates this time, it was a question. Do you want to stay human? It didn't threaten, it didn't seduce, it simply offered. And I understood, not with my brain but with my existence, that saying yes meant the end of everything I'd ever known. The Empire, the wars, the pain, even the identity I called me. All of it would be reformed. But I also understood something else. Saying no didn't stop what was coming, because it wasn't just about me. The transformation had already begun, in us, in the systems, in the very structure of space and time. The black spheres were no longer anomalies. They were seeds. And the galaxy, it was the soil. The resistance started in the shadows, not in protest of the transformation, but in fear of it. They called themselves the Lineage, a purist faction of high-ranking imperial officers, rogue AIs, old-blood oligarchs, and ex-military who still believed the Empire could be saved, even rebuilt. Their goal was simple. Stop the spread. Stop the dreams. Stop us. To them, we were contaminated, touched by something unnatural, a threat to their order, their chain of command, their goddamn pyramids of control. They didn't see evolution. They saw infection. Their first strike was surgical, clean, precise. They hit a medical convoy in the Dregos sector. 26 humans aboard, all flagged for neurological instability, suspected exposure to black sphere signals. None survived. No investigation followed. The Empire quietly flagged it as engine failure during warp phase. 2 days later, they hit a research satellite orbiting Trellis 3. This time, they didn't even bother faking an accident. They just burned it from orbit. 79 personnel, mostly scientists, no warning, no demands, and no retaliation. Because there was no one left to retaliate. The Empire had fractured. Officially, it still existed, still pushed broadcasts through its few remaining loyal systems, preaching unity, peace, strength. But inside, it was hollow, dying, gutted from within by fear, confusion, and those who saw the truth but couldn't handle it. I was contacted by a man from the lineage. Former admiral. Said he remembered me from Norak, called me an early stage, like I was a disease in its first symptoms. He offered me a choice. Surrender and be treated. Or be hunted. I told him I'd already chosen something far older than his rank, his medals, or his empty god. Then I shut the comm and rigged my transponder to explode if tampered with. I wasn't going to be collected by men who still clung to a sinking empire like rats to a corpse. But that's when I realized something worse. It wasn't just them who feared what we were becoming. Some of us did too. I found one of them on a derelict mining station off Syros K, a woman who'd been part of the original Norak science team, one of the few who survived and vanished. Her eyes had the same black shimmer I'd seen in my own reflection lately, but behind them was something else. Guilt. She told me the truth in a whisper, like it burned to say it aloud. We were wrong. It's not integration, it's replacement. I wanted to argue. Tell her that wasn't what I felt, but deep down, I knew. We weren't evolving. We were being rewritten. Slowly, quietly. Our memories, our instincts, our capacity for fear, for love, for identity, it was being flattened, made efficient, streamlined. Human emotion was a noise, and they were turning us into signal. Some resisted, others embraced it. I stayed in between, too aware to surrender, too altered to fight like I used to. And it was in that in-between space that I began to understand something terrifying. The black spheres didn't conquer us with force. They didn't need to. They introduced an idea. And ideas are viral. I watched a technician on the station solve an engineering problem that should have taken days. He did it in minutes, unaware that he'd been dreaming of the solution for weeks. The knowledge had simply settled into him, like fog into a valley. His eyes shimmered too. It wasn't just spreading. It was accelerating. The galaxy was being rewritten at the speed of thought. Entire colonies stopped responding to Empire channels, not because they were attacked, because they'd joined. Abandoned currency, hierarchy, control. Began building things no one ordered, no one designed. Structures with curves that bent in ways space shouldn't allow. Spires that hummed with a music that made grown men weep without understanding why. We weren't just becoming something else. We were building something else, something massive. And every time I looked at the stars, I realized the galaxy wasn't being conquered. It was becoming part of a circuit. And the final connection was almost complete. The day the final sphere arrived, it didn't appear in deep space or orbit some forgotten planet. It hovered over Earth, low, visible, close enough to cast a shadow over entire continents. And for the first time, the Empire didn't deny, didn't spin a story, didn't say a word. because there was no one left to speak. No Senate, no High Council, just fractured systems, burnt-out fleets, and leaders too afraid to look at the sky. Earth, the birthplace of humanity, the foundation of all our arrogance, stood still beneath the hum of something eternal. I watched it all from a moon outpost in the Tega cluster. Alone. Not because I was hiding, but because I couldn't trust what I'd become anymore. I was half transformed, half aware. I still felt human fear. I still remembered faces, names, voices. But my thoughts came in shapes now. Patterns, sequences. I could calculate star routes just by blinking. I didn't feel time the way I used to. And worst of all, I didn't miss being human. But then the message came. Not from the black spheres, from Earth. A wideband burst, broadcast on every frequency left. Raw, unfiltered, trembling with defiance. It wasn't from a government, a military force, or even a leader. It came from a man. An old one, voice cracked with age and rage. To those of you who still remember what it means to bleed, to lose, to love, fight them. We were not made to be silent. We were not meant to be perfect. Humanity's flaws are its freedom. If they want our minds, then let's show them our madness. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't strategic, but it caught fire. All across the stars, survivors lit up systems with EMP bursts, overloaded reactors, sabotaged black site labs that had been quietly experimenting on early-stage converts like me. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to stay broken, to stay human. Some called it the last scream. Others, the madness war. I called it what it was. Desperation. Because deep down, every soldier who fought knew. It wasn't just the spheres they were battling. It was the future itself. I watched skirmishes from above. Ground troops firing at shadows. Ships diving into planets just to collapse gravitational anomalies. Rebels tearing apart libraries filled with new architecture, knowledge too advanced for the human mind to hold without shattering. It was chaos. Beautiful, raw, uncontrollable chaos. And the black spheres? They did nothing. They watched. They observed. They understood. Because now the experiment was complete. They'd seen it all. Resistance, acceptance, madness, obedience. Every permutation of the human condition played out across billions of minds. And with that, their silence broke. The sky filled with geometry, shapes in motion, ideas in form, a language of patterns and pulses and recursion. I saw it, all of it, pouring into my mind like water into a cracked bowl, and for the first time, I saw them as they truly were. Not invaders, not saviors, reflections. They weren't here to take anything. They were here to show us what we'd always been becoming. A species not bound by flesh or emotion or control. A species born in chaos, now blooming into pattern. And that's when I realized the choice was never between transformation and extinction. The choice was who controlled the transformation. Us or them? The man on Earth, the last voice of fire, called for madness, and millions answered. But what he didn't realize is that madness is part of the pattern. It wasn't resistance, it was the final piece. And as the last signal spread across space, I felt everything go quiet. Not silent, not dead. Still. Like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see which part of us survived. I stood at the edge of a dying moon, watching Earth flicker like a candle caught in wind. Below me, humanity's final scream still echoed across the stars, rebels sabotaging the impossible, purists detonating singularity bombs in defiance, families praying to gods that no longer listened. And above it all, the last black sphere hung silent, like it had heard enough. No more transmissions, no more dreams, no more choices, just arrival. The transformation wasn't coming. It had already happened. I didn't feel it like a wave or a strike. It was instant, like a switch had flipped across every atom, every synapse. One moment I was alone, standing in flesh, thoughts wrapped in language. The next, I was everywhere, inside memories that weren't mine, living in the emotions of people I'd never met, feeling the entire history of humanity like it was happening now. There was no pain, no joy, just understanding. I saw a mother holding her child as the cities collapsed. I felt her heartbeat echo through the fabric of reality, soft, terrified, defiant. I lived the madness of a soldier who cut his own implants out with a broken blade because he refused to let the spheres think for him. I drowned in the mind of a rebel who saw the true architecture in her hallucinations, and died laughing because she realized she'd already built it with her every broken thought. And I knew then, this was the test, not of strength, of meaning. The spheres never wanted to control us. They didn't even want to change us. They wanted to see what we did when faced with the void beyond comprehension, when stripped of empire, law, hierarchy, when left alone with only ourselves. Some shattered, some surrendered, some screamed until the stars bled. But enough of us chose to create, not blindly, not obediently. We built in chaos, we dreamed in paradox, we loved things we couldn't explain, fought enemies that didn't exist, cried for moments that had never happened. And in doing so, we became what the black spheres had never expected, unpredictable. And in the language of the architects, the gods who'd once seeded their symbols across galaxies, unpredictability was sacred. I returned to my body then, or something close to it. Flesh, yes, but not only that. I was wrapped in memory, in concept, in music only existence could hear, and when I looked out into the sky, they were gone. The black spheres, every one of them, not destroyed, not fleeing, integrated, folded into the new reality we'd built, not one of empire, not one of silence, a reality of contradiction, of madness and brilliance, of pain and poetry, a human universe. The empire didn't survive, but humanity did, not as rulers, not as slaves, but as the one thing that could never be absorbed, wild thought, the kind that builds and breaks at once, the kind that dreams and screams, the kind that makes the stars nervous. I sit here now, wherever here is, with my memories drifting like satellites. I am no longer just a man, but I remember being one. And if anyone finds this, if this thought ever reaches another mind, in another age, remember this. We were never meant to be understood. We were meant to be impossible. And in the end, that's what saved us.